pronoun. And I live in Horseheads, New York in the Southern Tier. I am going to be taking a bigger role in coordinating the Renewable Heat Now campaign along with all of you this year. And I'm very excited to be doing that. So let's go to the next slide, Bryn, and we'll go over tonight's agenda. So we're going to just really talk quickly about our campaign, the Renewable Heat Now campaign. Renewable Heat Now is a campaign made of many organizations. We're not, there is no organization or nonprofit called Renewable Heat Now. We're going to talk about our accomplishments, what we've been up to since last we met earlier in the summer, what we have on deck, some of what we have on deck for this coming year, and we're going to have a little training opportunity. And we're going to run a poll to find out from you what further trainings and skill building that you're interested in. Next slide, please. So Renewable Heat Now, as I mentioned, is a campaign. We are 20 organizations strong, and we have a very simple and clear goal, which is to get fossil fuels out of our buildings in New York State. And so in that vein, we advocate for policies that accelerate the adoption of ground source and air source heat pumps, as well as other building energy efficiency measures. We have base building groups, grassroots advocacy groups, policy groups, legal groups, and big national groups that are part of our campaign, as well as small local groups and everything in between. Next slide, please. Well, why is this campaign important? Probably most of you know this because you're on this Zoom call, but let's just review. We are very concerned about the climate crisis. I'm sure like many of you, I'm sure like me, many of you have spent the day worrying about your friends and neighbors and relatives who live down in Florida during Hurricane Ian. And we know that this climate change is being caused by the emissions from burning fossil fuels. And in New York, buildings are the largest source of those fossil fuel emissions. So we're very concerned about the climate and the impact of buildings. Also, a great benefit for getting off fossil fuels is a health benefit, both inside buildings and outside of them, and especially that indoor air quality. And we're very concerned about energy affordability. And of course, jobs. We really want to grow the green economy and have a state that's thriving and prosperous for everyone. And our state agencies tell us that we're looking at, hundreds of thousands of new jobs if we work to weatherize and electrify all of our existing buildings in New York. Next slide, please. So a lot of you are familiar with what we accomplished last year. Was not the first year for the Renewable Heat Now campaign. I think it was the 4th or 5th year, but it was the first year that we had a legislative strategy. And so we had a slate of bills that we were trying to get passed in Albany. And in order to accomplish that, we did a lot of activities and actions that all of you helped with. Lots and lots of lobby meetings with legislators, press conferences, rallies, emails and tweets and phone calls to legislators, and letters, opinion letters, and earned media, radio interviews, etc., to help promote the facts about the climate crisis and the solutions that we can adopt and must adopt in our buildings. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Aguilé, the Executive Director of Alliance for Green Economy, to talk about what we accomplished last year. Go ahead, Jessica.
Hi, everyone. So nice to see everyone again. Welcome to anyone who is new to our Power Hours. We're so excited to have you, and welcome back for those of you who joined our Power Hours during the last legislative session. So I'm just going to quickly review what we accomplished during the 2022 legislative session, which we keep referring to as last year, but it was actually still this year. Just feels like a long time ago. So what we have accomplished so far this year is the Governor Hochul made a commitment in her state of the state in January to 2 million climate-friendly homes by 2030. And that will be at least 1 million all-electric homes, 1 million electric ready, which means homes that are ready to be electrified and can take those electric appliances like heat pumps and electric and induction stoves. And 800,000 of those need to be for low and moderate income households. So that was a huge increase in the state's goal for getting buildings and homes off of fossil fuels. During the budget session, section of the legislative session, we secured a $5,000 geothermal tax credit. Also, during the budget section of the session, we secured money in the Bond Act, which still needs to be voted in by voters in November. But if voters approve this Bond Act, there will be money for green buildings. And then we also got in the capital housing plan, 250 million over 5 years for electrification and weatherization. And then we also got two important pieces of legislation passed: the Advanced Building Appliance and Equipment Standards Act, which is a mouthful. I'm so glad we don't have to keep saying that during this upcoming legislative session. It's a really important bill that's now become law. It requires New York State to update building codes in accordance with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and also appliance efficiency standards, which will help get the most inefficient appliances out of our stores and slash energy use, saving New Yorkers $15 billion on energy costs between now and 2035. And we also passed the Utility Thermal Energy Network and Jobs Act, which was a bill that got introduced very, very late in session and passed very quickly. And it was a collaboration between environmental groups and organized labor. And it enables utilities to build community scale renewable heating and cooling infrastructure called thermal energy networks or district geothermal energy systems. And it includes labor protections, local hiring, and transition for gas utility workers. And it starts with each utility doing pilot projects. So that's what we accomplished during the legislative session. If we can go to the next slide. And since the legislative session, there's some other good news that we wanted to share in case you haven't seen it. So I mentioned that $250 million for in the housing capital plan for electrification and weatherization. It's been announced now that that money is going to fund something called the Climate Friendly Homes Fund. And it's going to provide small multifamily properties between 5 and 50 units access to funds to support electrification measures. There was also great news in the last few weeks that Homes and Community Renewal has announced a new building standard, which is going to require all new construction that's funded by that state agency will have to have all electric high performance, and that's starting in 2023. And then very recently, Governor Hochul issued Executive Order 2022, which is going to require all electric new construction for state buildings starting in 2024. And I'm not going to read all the details of that, but we get a lot of questions about the details of it. So I put the details on the slide so that you can review it at your leisure for all the important details about that executive order. And we really see this as, you know, as many of you will recall, we were fighting for an all-electric building legislation last year that would have required any new building to be all electric starting in 2024. So this is the governor doing what she can with her state agencies to require that standard for state buildings. Next slide. And then what we left undone, that we didn't get across the finish line during the last legislative session, we were fighting for a green affordable housing budget. We were asking for $1 billion to fund weatherization and electrification for disadvantaged communities. We wanted this fund to cover not just electrification and weatherization, but also the pre-weatherization and pre-electrification work that needs to happen in many buildings, such as mold, lead, and asbestos remediation, deferred maintenance, and electrical upgrades. And so we did not get that big budget, but we did get that $250 million over 5 years. We were also fighting for the All Electric Building Act, which would have ensured new buildings are built with all electric heating, cooking, and hot water systems beginning in 2024 for small buildings and 2027 for large buildings. And then we were also fighting for the Gas Transition and Affordable Energy Act, which would have ended a really important, it would have very importantly ended this fossil fuel subsidy that a lot of people don't know about. On our energy bills, we're all paying for free gas hookups for any new customers. It's called the 100-foot rule. So any customer that's within 100 feet of the gas system can get a free gas hookup, and all the existing gas ratepayers need to pay for that. So it would have ended that, and it would have created a plan to help phase out gas utilities. And while we didn't win that bill, the Public Service Commission did issue an order during the last legislative session to put into place a gas planning proceeding and a gas planning process that's going to involve a lot more public involvement and transparency for the utilities and how they're planning their gas system, and hopefully require them to plan according to the CLCPA. So we'll be involving ourselves in that proceeding, but also going back in for some of these bills that we did not pass during the last legislative session. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to hand it back to Lisa to talk more about what we did over the summer.
Okay, thanks, Jessica, so much for that overview. And let's all take a deep breath and breathe in and out, because that was a lot that we accomplished last year, that all of, or most of you worked on. And we could never have done that without all of you and all of those phone calls you made and the emails you wrote and the letters you published and the meetings you had with legislators. And so we did take, it was a lot of work and very busy. So we did take somewhat of a break over the summer. But we didn't take a complete break because we started doing other kinds of outreach. There was a postcard developed by a group of us that that any group or organization could use in their tabling and outreach events, that we could get signed. And you see some lovely pictures of that on this slide. And there is a link Andra's just putting in the chat now. Thank you so much, Andra, to sign this postcard virtually. And I want to let you know that these postcards are available to any of you who are doing any tabling or outreach events, whether you're going to a festival to table for your organization, or whether you're having people over to sign postcards as part of an Indivisible group or your book club or whatever it is. You can get these postcards mailed to you to get them filled out and then mail them back to us. And we're going to give you the information in the chat also how to get your hands on some of these beautiful postcards. Okay. Another piece of the work you're going to hear more about later in this presentation is passing resolutions at the local level to support the Climate Action Council's scoping plan that is going to be finalized this year, and support some of the major pieces of the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is New York's landmark climate law. So the Climate Action Council is the group of people that have been working to interpret the climate law and to implement the climate law. And most of you probably know that they have been meeting regularly. There was a scoping document published. There was a comment period on that scoping document. And now that is getting finalized. And there's a lot of tussling over what goes in the final document that people are going to have to follow. So these local resolutions are meant to provide political support as well as education at the local level about some of the major tenets of that plan. And you'll hear more about that soon. And then we met on Zoom to strategize about what pieces of the work we needed to carry forward for this year. And when I mean this year, I mean this legislative session and this sort of lawmaking session. So, and that's why we are so excited to have this meeting with all of you today to talk about some of the work that's coming up, how you can get involved, and how you can help us to grow this movement and the power of this movement. So with that said, let's go to the next slide and let me introduce the wonderful and brilliant Liz Moran from Earth Justice to go over the coming calendar of the year. Go ahead, Liz.
Great. Thanks so much, Lisa. I just want to emphasize how amazing the work has been that you have all accomplished. That list of victories that Jessica went through is really phenomenal. I have to emphasize this, and this is not to knock other coalitions, but I'm part of a lot of other coalitions, and the victory list is not that long because it's hard work. It's really hard work. So this is a testament to all of you, and I'm so excited to bring forth that same energy as we come into this coming budget season and legislative session, because as you can see, we still have a lot more work to do. So let's talk about where we are right now. So for the next few months until we hit the new year, this is a lot of building. This is a period of building. You know, that's part of what we're doing this summer. We're beginning to put together our strategy plans for this coming year. We're fine-tuning what our priorities are going to be as we advocate in this budget season and legislative session. So October through December is dedicated towards that. We'll be working on a letter to the governor, and now is a really good time to start pressuring the governor regarding the budget. This time of year, the governor is already thinking about what's going to be in this coming fiscal year, her proposed budget. Now, of course, we still have the election, so we don't know for sure yet if we're still going to have the same governor, but I imagine her team is still doing some preparatory work for the budget at this point in time. So it makes sense for us to start pressuring her on what we want. We also are going to want to start talking to legislators. Now, again, they're also going to be going through their elections. We won't know for sure who's going to be in this new legislative session until after the November election, but there's some that we kind of have a good sense are very likely to win their races. So it's a good time of year for us to start having these introductory meetings and talking about our priorities and what we'd like to see them do. So in December, the Climate Action Council will have their final scoping plan. A lot of the work we're doing now is to help influence that final plan, but that's just something to keep in mind. That also could serve as a really good jumping off point as we begin our advocacy in a much more public manner before the new year and the legislative session begins in January. Because, you know, there are going to be some policy recommendations. There's a good chance there's going to be recommendations in there that require action from the legislature. So we'll have to see. In early January, legislative session begins. We can expect to see the governor's state-of-the-state and her executive budget proposal. So that all happens in state-of-state, usually like the first week of March, the governor's executive budget, probably like second, third week of January. So while that's all going on, we're going to respond to what's in the governor's budget and her State of the State address. And from there, we'll kind of have a sense of, okay, this is the tone that the governor is setting for this coming year. We'll have an idea for sure of where she is. So until the budget is finalized, which is April 1st, that's the statutory deadline, we have several pressure points in between. There will be legislative hearings related to our different issues. Those are opportunities to provide pressure on legislators and the governor. We're going to want to have a lot of lobby meetings. I know a number of you are a part of our very important lobby committees. So we're going to be doing all that up until the budget is finalized, which again, statutory deadline is April 1st. Before then, we'll try to influence the one house budgets. The Assembly and the Senate each put out their own version of the budget after the governor's. So that's another key leverage point. We want to get our stuff in one of those budgets to help us get it in the final. Once the budget is finalized, then we go towards any standalone bills that we're working on. There's going to be more phone call actions. We're going to have more meetings. We're going to have rallies. There will be more hearings and more. You know, this is a really creative group. We'll probably have a lot of different tactics that we'll be implementing through the course of the legislative session as needed. Then sometime early to mid-June, usually, the legislative session will wrap up. And if I'm going to do some psychic reading, but I'll also knock on wood, we're going to come out of this session with another long list of victories. So then we'll get to take a breather. We'll get to bathe in the glorious bath of our victories, and we'll start preparing again for the following year. So next slide. What is it we're fighting for? Stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more, but Jessica did tease us some of these things. There are things that we worked on last year that we are going to be working on again in some manner this year. Hopefully we'll have some fine-tuned version of the All Electric Buildings Act. We'll have, a refreshed version of the Gas Transition Act. And we're going to keep fighting for funding to make sure we can meet our goal of electrifying 2 million homes by 2030 with a strong prioritization towards low to moderate income households. So stay tuned. We'll have more details, but that's the general sense of what we'll be doing this year. And at that point, I believe I'll either pass it back to Lisa or Cal next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. And let's turn it over to Cal Truman. Earlier this evening, I said that we were going to, next slide, please, Bryn. We're going to talk about the local resolutions to support the CLCPA, and Cal Truman from, I believe, New Yorkers for Clean Power, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, is they are here to go over that and how you can get involved with that effort. Take it away,
Sure.
Kat.
So as was touched on earlier in the presentation, the Climate Action Council is a group of, I believe it's 22 people. So it's a pretty large group that are working on figuring out, okay, we've got these targets from the Climate Act. How do we get from where we are now to where we need to go, where we need to arrive? And so they've been working on that plan over the past several months. There was a public comment period over the spring and summer, and right now they're working on finalizing that plan. There was a meeting earlier today that was open for the public to listen to from 1 to 4 p.m. today of the Climate Action Council, and it sounds like they're really getting down to the wire of figuring out what they're going to do. So some of the recommendations that came out of the scoping plan for the building sector in particular, since that's what we're focusing on with RHN, would be all electric codes for new construction as of 2024. So no gas hookups in new buildings, no oil boilers in new buildings. And that starts with shorter buildings, so under 5 stories. As of 2027, that would expand to all new construction. Zero emission standards for replacement of fossil fuel equipment at end of useful life, mostly residential. So what that means is things like if your gas stove kicks the bucket in a decade, you would be able to replace it with an efficient electric stove. You would not be able to replace it with a brand new gas stove that would lock you into another decade and more of having to use gas. And that goes to more appliances as we move on through the years. And they also recommend aligning the public service law with the Climate Act so that you don't have those conflicting obligations of trying to promote gas and also promote the transition to clean energy, because right now those are at loggerheads. So if you go to the next slide, please. The idea of the resolutions of support is that the point is to show that your municipality supports the process of getting us to these targets that are laid out in the Climate Act. There has been a great deal of fossil fuel industry misinformation focused on good old New York. Some of our favorite international conglomerates of oil companies are hard at work trying to figure out how to derail this plan because it cuts into their profits. And so it's really important for regular people to also show the state what our priorities are, especially when those priorities are clean energy and healthy transition. So passing a resolution in your municipality would bring attention to the urgency of the climate crisis. The model resolution that's available, the text that's available, cites the findings from the most recent IPCC report. So that's international consensus from scientists on climate change. The model resolution also affirms the importance of the Climate Act. It accurately describes and affirms key recommendations from that draft scoping plan to counteract some of the things that aren't in the plan that some of this fossil fuel misinformation says is in the plan. It highlights the non-climate benefits of actions for public health, jobs, natural resource protection, agricultural land preservation, and local economic investments. So it shows why municipalities are in favor of some of these measures. It urges support for measures that are important to rural and under-resourced communities, whether that's increased financial incentives for some of these building improvements, or whether that's state investment in rural public transportation, things like that. And then it calls for a statewide public education and information campaign on the benefits of a clean energy economy and climate-friendly choices by consumers. So all of these bullet points are laid out in a document that I believe just went out in the chat, as well as the text of the model resolution of support, which you can modify for your own community and present to hopefully be passed. I want to read through the very exciting, I think, list of places that have already passed resolutions of support or are pending resolutions of support. That includes the counties of Ulster, Tompkins, Albany, and Monroe, the towns of Marbletown, New Paltz, Ossining, Rhinebeck, Red Hook, New Lebanon, Austerlitz, Cortland, and Rosendale, the villages of Hastings-on-Hudson, New Paltz, Rhinebeck, Croton, and Kinderhook, the cities of Albany, New Rochelle, New York City, Hudson, Peekskill, Syracuse, and Kingston. Kingston, I will say, I'm a member of Climate Smart Kingston Commission and was able to present the resolution to the Common Council in Kingston, and they did accept it. So I've had a success on this. And then the final group that has passed a resolution of support is the Westchester Municipal Officials Association. So some of the reasons to pass one of these resolutions would be local governments are critical partners in addressing climate change. Your views and support carry important weight with state decision makers, and it's really important that they hear from you and not just from the gas industry. Hearing from the diversity of New York municipalities is important. You know, there are large and small communities, urban, suburban, rural, you know, there's county, village level across different New York regions. It's really great for them to hear from everyone. Public comments ended in July, but as we mentioned earlier, the final scoping plan won't be released until the end of 2022. So they're still working on this. Getting support is still meaningful. Passing a resolution is a useful public education tool. By passing it, other people in your community may become aware of the Climate Act and the scoping process. And the resolution does help to counter misinformation from the well-funded fossil fuel industry campaign that's underway in New York. So that's what I have to say about passing a resolution of support. And if you have questions for me, please put them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cal. That was really, really inspirational. And I'll just say that, you know, this work at the local level is not just something we're trying in this campaign. This is something that's been very effective in the past to build public support for some of the climate wins we've had in New York State. And so if you think that your municipality might be open to this, there's going to be information in the chat for how to get your hands on the webinar teaching about how to do these resolutions, as well as the resolution itself, and support from Cal and other people who've been working on getting these resolutions passed. So that is just super exciting. Okay, Andra is going to talk about a couple of other things now that are also happening in support of the Climate Action Council scoping plan. Go ahead, Andra.
Thank you, Lisa. And I wanted to mention to everybody and reassure you that we will take all the links that we've put in the chat and share them with you in an email, probably tomorrow. So look forward to that. Also send you copies of the slides. So I wanted to come on briefly and talk about the health professionals letter that we work at Renewable Heat Now are working on in conjunction with the Rocky Mountain Institute, which is sort of like a partner organization for our campaign. The letter calls on decision makers in New York, the Climate Action Council, the legislator, the governor, and city, county, and other local leaders to support a strong Climate Action Council scoping plan. We want to shore up their resolve to make it as powerful as possible. And we want them to pay attention to the clear scientific evidence that fossil fuel combustion in buildings harms people's health. It is causing indoor pollution and outdoor pollution, and it is driving climate change and harming health. So we are collecting signatures from individual healthcare professionals and also healthcare professional organizations. Did I get the link? I think I did. I hope. Let's see. And we'd like your help in collecting those signatures. If you know anybody who can, who is a health professional, a nurse, part of an organization, part of a healthcare provider group, have them take a look at that letter. This is a form where they can sign on, but the entire letter is linked there also. And you can see the impressive list of organizations and individuals that have already signed on, ranging from Concerned Health Professionals of New York to the New York State Public Health Association to the American Academy of Pediatrics in New York State, all 3 chapters. It's really great. So we'll also have ways that we're going to use this letter once it has a good number of signatures on it. The way we're going to use those postcards that we're all getting signed for some sort of public facing event. So stay tuned for more ways that you can take action in October. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andra. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I neglected to say at the beginning of this webinar that, we have built such an impressive movement. All of you who were involved last year, like Liz was saying, that's an incredible list of accomplishments. After only one legislative session, often bills don't get passed until they've been introduced several different times. And that really speaks to the strength of this movement that is growing. However, because we were so successful, like Cal was mentioning, there was a multi-million-dollar effort by the fossil fuel industry to defeat our agenda. And we did not win all of the legislation that we hoped to win. And so we need to think about what skills we all need to build to continue to grow our movement and make it stronger so that we have enough power to get things passed, because that we don't have the money and the resources that the fossil fuel industry has, right? What we have is our people power, and we have to keep growing our people power so that we can make our movement more powerful. So to that end, what we're going to do is a little bit of skill building in some of our monthly meetings, including tonight at the kickoff. And we have a wonderful presenter who's going to do a little mini training for all of you. But he's just going to be with us in a few minutes. So Bryn, can we go to the poll? Because we'd like to hear from all of you. What kinds of skill building would be most useful to you in your local work? So please take a minute to fill out this Zoom poll while we get set up for the training. So this is a list of what kind of trainings you would want or need this might be something we offer on these monthly calls, or it might be something that we work with one of our member organizations to offer and market to you. And these are some of the skills that we all need in effective movement building and power building at the local and state level. We're going to give you guys a couple of minutes here. Okay, about 10 more people, if you don't mind just participating in this poll really quickly, or if you want something else that isn't in this poll, just write it in the chat, or if you want to offer a training, you can write that in the chat. Feel free to use the chat if the poll isn't useful to you. I see Cal in the chat saying as a co-host, they can't participate in the poll, but interested in getting better at writing letters to the editor. Thank you for that, Cal. Okay, terrific. Okay, I think, Bryn, we can probably end the poll and share the results with everybody. Yes, if your organization provides these trainings or can provide these trainings and you're part of Renewable Heat now, please go ahead and add that and share that in the chat. If you have a training coming up that is relevant, please go ahead and share the link to sign up for that training. Training is iterative work, meaning that we are always building our training muscle, no matter whether it's our first time working on grassroots organizing or whether we've been doing it for years. We're always building our training muscle and learning and improving our skills. So this isn't something like, once you've been trained, you know how to do it forever. It's like we're always continuing to improve. Okay, agree with Delia. I don't know what Delia is saying. So, bird dogging the governor. That's a good one. Okay. It looks like from what Bryn is sharing that we have the clear winner of what we need most is some media trainings, and that's really good to know, because that is definitely something we can work on helping to provide. And then after that comes lobbying confidently, and we will definitely work on that as well. And then it looks like there's generally a fair amount of interest in all of the other ideas that we came up with. At least a third of you are interested in all of them. So that's great news. And Bryn, you can go ahead and stop sharing that now. Is it still on my screen? I don't know why. I guess I had to close it. So I'm going to just tell you a little bit story, and then we'll have a little training by my friend Isaac Silverman Gorn, who is working with FRAC Action and has been organizing at the state and local level around climate issues for many years. So when I was first getting involved in doing climate work in New York State, this was about, 7 or 8 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Isaac. We traveled across the state together to go to a meeting about how to stop gas pipelines. At the time was the main thing we were fighting. And so I was just getting started. I didn't know who was who, what was what, who was working on what issue. Gas pipelines were really interesting to me because it was very relevant to my local area. And so Isaac was an organizer at that time with Citizen Action of New York. And following up from that, from meeting Isaac and getting to know him on that cross-state trip, we had a series of one-to-ones, which was a meeting where sort of we got to know each other and tried to figure out, what piece of the work we might get involved in together. So as a result of one of our first meetings, Isaac invited me to drive to Binghamton, which is about an hour from my house, to do a training on anti-racism and to learn why anti-racism is super important to any kind of work you're doing, and especially the climate work. So that was a great opportunity for me as somebody new to the movement. And I did go to Binghamton and have that was the first of many anti-racist trainings that I had the opportunity to do. And that was helped really build my skills and connect my connection with Isaac. And when I had the opportunity to start working as a paid climate organizer, Isaac was one of the first people I turned to because I had learned to know him and trust him, to learn about what I needed to know to be a community organizer. And that helped launch a new career and job for me with the help of Isaac. So is Isaac here? Because he texted me that he was going to be here in 5 minutes, and that was
Yes, Isaac is here.
Oh, good, because I'm just talking and I didn't see him come into the room. So without any further ado, I will turn over this meeting to Isaac Silverman-Gorn.
Yeah, hey everybody. I hope I didn't keep us stalling all too long. And I should add that so Lisa and I have now enjoyed an 8 or 10 year wonderful relationship, and it started with a one-on-one meeting where we got to know each other better. Yeah, and I have a good sense of what motivates Lisa. I know where she's coming from, and we work really well together because we took the time to get to know each other on that deeper way. So there were a few, the intention of this part of the meeting is to do a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit of skills building, skills training, all in the context of building our movement, growing our numbers, and winning these victories, right? Winning these legislative victories this session. The first step that is so critical for community organizers to take is establishing a story of self. So what deeply motivates you? Why are you giving up your Thursday night here past 7 o'clock when you could be doing any number of other things to spend time with us, learn about this legislation, and be around people from across the state who are doing this amazing work? We'll talk a little bit more about that in depth. We'll go into what a one-on-one is by definition, who to have one with, and how to have an effective one. Yeah, and how much, is anyone able to tell me how much time I have?
You basically have until 7:20, 8.
Okay, all right, we'll
Yeah.
keep it moving then. That's perfect. Yeah, so next slide here. I don't know who's controlling that, probably Bren, and shout out to Bren and the amazing folks at New Yorkers for Clean Power for doing all of this tech stuff that I'm clueless about. So story of self is a deeply personal thing. What motivates you as an individual to be here in community with us as we all work together to fight for a better future? I'm strongly of the opinion that self-reflection is a good thing in life at large, and also particularly in a movement context. And story of self is an opportunity to really reflect back on what your mission statement is in life and why you're giving your time, energy, and passion into being here with us and working on these common goals. A story of self can be a defining moment for you where you had a realization, descriptive things are good. Having our own narrative and motivation nailed down, solid in our head. So I have until, okay, I have another 20 minutes. That's different. That's cool. So we will have some time to do some breakouts and dive in a little bit more to this, which is great. So having our own story of self and what our core motivating ideals are is critical to building a sustainable and powerful movement that we need to win some real victories. So just to mention also, you know, we're kind of plowing through this in about 40 minutes. Story of self on its own would be a good hour-long training. So just to acknowledge that, you know, it's going to be a lot of information. We have resources to share. There are a ton of resources out there on all of this. For those, you know, there are folks on this call, 45 other people who have all done at varying degrees of this work, right? And if you have not reflected back on your core motivating factors, this is an invitation to do so. In a while, if you have not, or if you haven't taken the time to do this, I think it's always valuable and will only help the work as we move forward. So yeah, next slide. Okay, so what is a one-on-one? And in its broadest terms, it is an intentionally structured conversation to build or strengthen a relationship. That's it at its core. I would now invite people in the chat, if there are other aspects of that definition that you would like to add to my definition. I'd drop that in the chat. Thanks to Andra, who just dropped a wonderful set of resources on Story of Self, how to do that on your own. But yeah, anyone else want to weigh in the chat on what a one-on-one conversation is? Okay, or if you want to, if you have a strong desire to weigh in, I invite you to raise your hand too. And I see we got a couple coming in. Okay, so I have from Ellen, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Find out what motivates the other person to deepen your connection and drive. Great, absolutely. From Bryn, an opportunity to find common ground and or skills. Absolutely. Yep. That's great. Yeah, I think that's a good, I think that is a good, pretty holistic definition. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right, now, so this is kind of a fun part. We get to talk about a spectrum of allies. So we're transitioning into who to have a one-on-one meeting with. So you all, everyone, all 45 of us or so have different networks of people in our lives, right? So the way that I view this kind of half of this semicircle, active participants, we are all active on one in some way or another because we're all on this call, right? Passive supporters, my paint skills, I get to show them off. We want to be focused on people who are ideologically with us, who might not be as deeply engaged or might not necessarily be as well informed. Up until, you know, it took me maybe until a year ago to realize how serious an issue fossil fuels in our homes and buildings were. That said, I was ideologically on point before I had that deeper knowledge. In the middle is people who are neutral or disengaged. Passive opponents are people who are ideologically opposed, but not actively working against us. And active opponents are gas industry who's doing ad buys, people who are, you know, putting out misinformation and fighting against our legislation. When we are choosing in our networks who to do a one-on-one meeting with, we are focused on passive supporters. We're focused on people who we don't have to do a bunch of ideological work on to bring to our side in a more effective way. So let's go to the next slide. And so this is, so I kind of said all these, this is just kind of, I just said everything here. So one really helpful tool, and we will have some time to do some breakouts. We can talk a little bit more about that when we get there. One amazingly helpful tool is, I think it's called network mapping. Different training programs call it different things. It's taking a piece of paper. You're in the middle of your own constellation. We're all in the center of our own universes, right? And it's so within all of our networks, there are different bubbles, basically. And so it's about connecting. So in each of those bubbles, so basically, I have another part-time job working at a nonprofit bike shop. I know 5 or 6 people from there who would be great candidates to have a one-on-one with. They're engaged with other community work. They're ideologically with us. So basically kind of bubbles expanding outward is what that would look like. So in the chat, if you want to drop an example of someone in your life who you'd like to have a one-on-one with, so what their role is like in your life, rather than I want to have a one-on-one with Joe. We don't know who Joe is, but maybe Joe is a member of your church or congregation, So in the chat, if you want to drop someone who you think just off the top of your head would be, or a successful one-on-one based on a connection that you had. Okay, well, so seeing not a whole lot. Okay, there we go. From Lynn, teacher friend Liz, former school neighbor. Wonderful. Yeah, that's great. That's someone who has a great deal of experience working with young people. That's a really powerful background that she's coming from, and a great person to talk to. From Anshul, physician friends, and Anshul, you're in a unique position to do that. Niece and nephew from Mora. Great. Okay. I've got a couple. Okay. So the purpose, so if I was not clear on the purpose of a one-on-one, the idea is to bring someone in a deeper way into the movement, broaden their engagement, get to know them better, and grow our movement. Okay. So from Sarah, is the objective to get the person more active in the climate movement? Doesn't this undercut the purpose of simply deep mutual understanding? I'm not entirely sure I understand what you're asking. I think getting to know someone on a deeper level is essential to building people's leadership capacity in the climate movement. And from Andra, I see neighbors who have signed postcards to the governor. Great. All right. So let's keep going. One more slide. And I see from Yvonne, I see my sister. She is a passive supporter. I'd like to have a one-on-one with her. I only just convinced her to vote in local elections in the last couple of years. She's always acted on her care of the environment and daily habits. That's wonderful. Yeah, and people you have a close relationship with otherwise that's great. Great strategy. And also from Ellen, so defining the term a little bit more, connect with someone active in a related movement. Absolutely. For example, lead abatement, which is a huge environmental justice issue across the state. Absolutely. Yeah, and so these are just, so we have some general tips on how to go about having this conversation, again, with the goal, the objective of bringing this person into our work in some capacity. So first and foremost, preparing, having a sense of what direction you'd think you would like the conversation to go, and being flexible and open to that conversation, maybe not necessarily going that direction. Being mindful of your surrounding environment. Is it a welcoming space? Is it comfortable? You're generally aiming to listen a whole lot more than you talk. So listening about 70%, speaking about 30%, sharing a broad vision, sharing your own broad vision, worldview, and experiences, having a specific amount of time set aside. So it's scheduled, there's a concrete end time rather than, it's a little bit more structured. being aware and mindful of your own story of activism, and being aware that everyone brings unique perspectives to the work, and being open and honest are all really important. On the flip side, making a high pressure pitch is it might work in the short term. A lot of, we were having really some wonderful conversations. There's a core group of us, we call it the Movement Building Committee. We've been having some wonderful conversations over time about building a sustainable movement, and a high pressure pitch can work in the short term. And as far as really building the movement in a more meaningful way, it means building relationships. It means taking time to get to know people. Judging people's past experiences is a quick way to turn someone off, and talking too much, hogging airwaves as well. So any questions on this before we move ahead? Is this making sense? And I would add, just as an anecdote, so my mother is deeply involved with some national work. She is writing personalized notes to voters in Georgia. That works great for her. It makes her happy. I mean, I don't think it's the most enjoyable, but it's a calming routine that can have some real change, some real impact on the national level. She would hate canvassing or phone banking. There is a lot of power in really deeply listening to what people are good at and what they want to do and where their skills and passions lie. There are some amazingly talented artists. That's not something I share. You saw my ability with Microsoft Paint a few slides back, but it's like, and the other thing is too, I was chatting about this with Andra. I do a great job talking to people. My strengths are not in the research. There's some really wonderful, amazing researchers here in this group, and so I see a direct question here. How might one initiate a one-on-one? That's a great question. Does the other person need to want to do it, or do we need to entice them? So the question, as far as asking the question, what it would look like is, hey, I see you're ideologically involved. I see you're involved with this. I'd love to sit down with you and learn. I'd love to sit down with you, learn a little bit more about what you're up to, and tell you a little bit about some of the work that I'm up to. That's how I would present it. Very simple, just a welcoming invitation without judgment, with the goal of wanting to learn more and being genuinely curious about what the other person brings to the table and where they're at. Yeah, so next slide. Okay, so that was, as far as like a formal presentation, that was what I had prepared. We do have some time to divvy up into breakout rooms. I'd like to, I think the question is going to be, what is most valuable for you? If and everyone is, this is a room full of 45 people or so who have, okay, yes, we did the Zoom poll already, Lisa says. Everyone here has different levels of engagement. If you have not worked on Story of Self, I invite you to take the next 10 minutes and work on that. Spend some time. There is the link in the chat, which we can drop in there again. If you'd like to spend 10 minutes doing a little network map, that's a great thing to do also. That's a great use of time. And we can open up we have the option to open up some breakout rooms as well, and practice asking questions. And this could even be a great opportunity to get to know someone who you might not know on this call. I promise you, I don't know everyone in the Zoom room. But yeah, how does that sound? So Bryn, are you able to open up some Zoom rooms for folks who want to practice one-on-ones? We can have some quiet time. We could put on some music. This we get to own this. This is our time and our space here. Yeah. And so Lisa says, as far as prompts, so developing a story of self would look like reading that link, spending a little bit of time, and actually writing your story of self. As far as and Andra just dropped another tool in the chat here. with a little bit more information on one-on-ones. It's from a great, it's an organization involved with tenant organizing. So yeah. All right, so I see 5 breakout rooms here. I invite you, again, this time and space is yours. I invite you to take some time to either, work on a network map. I'm happy to hop from room to room if that's where we'd like to go.
Okay, thank you, Isaac. So I think we're gonna, if you don't know how to use a breakout room, you need to scroll, and my computer, it's along the bottom of my screen where I have different options. It says breakout rooms, and if I click on that, it shows 5 rooms. And if you scroll down, it gives you the option of joining the different rooms. I see somebody is in a breakout room 3 waiting for someone to join her or join them, and someone's in breakout room 4. So I encourage you to choose a breakout room, maybe where there's somebody you don't know yet, and you might want to have a conversation with them, because this is a very low stakes, easy one-on-one practice, where everybody already is working on this work. So can just practice listening and asking questions and getting to know the other person. And we will come back from this in what, Isaac, 10 minutes?
Yeah, so we have, it is presently 7:35. Let's come back at 7:45, and then we can do just a quick debrief and call it a night. How does that sound good, Lisa?
Sounds great. Okay.
All right, awesome. Yeah, and I'll hop room to room also. So thank you. Appreciate everyone's thoughtful attention at the end of it's easy to pay attention at the start of a Zoom meeting. I know it's easy to fade as time goes on. So thank you everyone for your attention and thoughtfulness.
Great.
Room number 2 has someone in it waiting for somebody to join them. Okay, great. Like someone joined them. Looks like room number 1, some folks could join in there if you want to have a conversation. If someone would like to join Lisa, you could go to room number 5. And if you need help getting into a room, just let me know and I will add you.
Lisa's all alone in room 5. I hope someone can join her.
Right. Thanks, Bryn, for bringing us back together. I think we might have to be a little bit more forceful momentarily.
It says the rooms are closing in 30 seconds.
Oh, there you go. The
I'll
forceful.
be sucked back into the.
I apologize, and really, thank you, Bryn, and all of NYCP. You all are, I feel like a crusty old person who doesn't yelling at clouds and not understanding technology, and that's okay.
You've been in the woods for 10 years. It's okay. No.
Something like that.
Anytime. I'm always happy to help.
Awesome. Cool. All right.
Hello.
Cool. Welcome back, everybody. I guess we're all here. Yeah, thank you. So I was just kind of hopping around room to room. Really appreciate everyone taking a little bit of time and sharing. I think, we can get caught up in, particularly, and I promise, as the legislative session starts and stuff gets warmed up, we will be moving at a quick pace, and I think it's also important, if nothing else, we all leave tonight knowing a little bit more about someone else who's involved in our movement, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think sometimes having a little bit less structure can be okay. That was by design, giving a variety of options for how we want to spend the remainder of our time together. Yeah, so maybe if we have one person from each group just give 60-second report back on on what you kind of the direction of conversation your group went. And I think I think I can remove okay, there we go. Yeah, so just one person from each group, if you want to just share generally how that went. I see in the chat Maura really enjoyed the breakout conversations. Anyone else want to compelled to share how that is? Anyone else? My grammar is slipping. It's been a long day. Is
I'll
anyone?
jump in, Isaac. This is Lisa. I was in breakout with Sarah Gronum from 350 and Ellen Lentz, I think. Is that your last name, Ellen? Which was really so fun. I'm sorry, I might have to stop for a second. And we really got to know Ellen. I never met before, and I got to hear about her story and how she ended up on this call. Sorry, I have to go mute the dog.
Awesome, thank you, Lisa. Anyone else compelled to?
I'll jump in. So there were 5 or 6 of us in our room, and one of the things that I really liked about it is that there were people from the city and people from Syracuse, where I used to live, and out in Wyoming County, which is in the middle of nowhere. So it was kind of nice to meet people coming from different places and talking about ways to really kind of deepen our involvement. So that was really nice to connect with other people. I thought that was terrific. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Excuse me, anyone else? No, and we don't need to put anyone on the spot, but yeah, thank you. I appreciate you're all taking some time to do that. And I really am of the belief that there is so much value that, it can be very easy to focus on metrics and measurements and everything else. That's the world that we live in. And there's so much value in some of the less structured time. And I might catch flack from, from some on this call, and that's okay. But I would just close by saying, in the remaining couple minutes, thank you all for being here. Viewing this as a multi-year fight. We've built a huge amount. We are in an amazing political, and this is part of the context, we're in an amazing political moment here in New York. And it's a result of a decade of activism. This is still, my humble take, and I could be wrong, the fracking fight moved the environmental movement forward in New York significantly. We are doing amazing work here, and it might take a year or two, but I really believe it's inevitable we're going to win this legislative fight that we're so deeply engaged in, working so hard in. And I just say thank you, everyone. It really has been a pleasure getting to know you all. And yeah, see y'all down the road.
Thanks,
Yeah, I'll drop
guys.
my,
I'm gonna take it from here. So just make sure that we get everybody out of here on time. That was really fun, and I hope we get to do more of that. And it's really great to keep honing our skills and meeting new people and building those relationships. Because, you know, we don't know, we can't control the outcome of our work. We don't know what the future holds. But while we all build a loving, beloved community amongst ourselves, I just feel like we can't be doing the wrong thing. So I think it's really important to take that time and have that unstructured time. So last year we thought we'd try something, which was creating lobby teams regionally, and it really worked fantastically well. And so if you are new to this organizing with Renewable Heat now, and you have not yet signed up to be part of a lobby team, we're going to send you to that link that's on the slide, and it'll be posted in the chat if it's not already, to sign up to connect with the people in your area who are going to be meeting with the legislators that represent you, because you're the ones they have to listen to. You're the ones who vote them in and out. And those regional lobby teams will talk more in future calls about how we're all going to work together at the regional level, and the support that we'll be able to provide you from Renewable Heat now to set up and carry out those lobby meetings and make those asks of the legislators. Next slide, please, Bryn. So let's stay in touch. As I said, we're going to be having these regular recurring meetings. We started last fall with what we called a couple of town hall meetings. And then we had, in the beginning of 2022, what we called Lobby Palooza. And then we started having what we were calling our monthly power hours, or every other week. I'm not sure how often we had them. And basically, this is our opportunity as a campaign to stay in touch with all of the grassroots members of our campaign. And so we will let you know when the next meeting is going to be, and we hope that you will come. And we hope that you will think about who in your network you might invite to join the next month's lobby meeting once we have a time for that, because these meetings are a great way to sort of get all the information, figure out how to take action, find out what's going on. So thank you so much for joining tonight, and I hope that we'll see you in a couple of weeks. So that's it for us tonight. Thanks to all the presenters. Thanks to all of you who participated. As Andra said earlier, we will send out an email to follow up with the links that you need, as well as the slides. And please feel free to reach out to us through the website, or Andra's. Maybe I can put my email and in the chat. Andra could put hers. And don't be a stranger if you want to get more involved than just these once a month meetings. We would love for that to happen. So let us know. Okay. And I think that's it for the slides, right? This is the last one. Yes, okay. These are extra slides. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for spending this hour and a half with us. Sometimes our meetings have been an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. That extra half hours for the training time. So, and I think that was very well worthwhile. Have a wonderful evening. Yes. Oh, that's Renewable Heat Meow is what we say when cats join the meeting. So from me and Scamper, have a good night.
Thanks very much.
Good night, everyone.
thanks, everyone.